Hey, I'm Mark Beebe, Director of Recovery Cokesbury. It's good to be with you tonight. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ and struggle with codependency. And thanks so much for being a part of this. We have been in the middle of a series of talks about strongholds. And the way we described strongholds, I would encourage you to watch the last few weeks if you're just now getting involved in this. The way we described strongholds was, think of them as being a patch on your heart that you can't figure out some way, somehow to pull off. And it would feel like if you started to pull on that patch, it would take your whole heart with you. And so that patch, to get it off, to get that stronghold off or out of your life, requires an incredibly strong solvent, none of which we by ourselves or, of our own volition or strength or power or whatever, right thinking, wisdom, willpower, any of that, none of that is going to satisfy as being that necessary solvent. We've been talking about the fact that the necessary solvent is Jesus, and we have kept referencing a piece of the Bible that in the book of Romans that talks about what do you do to deal with these strongholds. And what the guy that wrote it, Paul, talks about is you got to put on the right kind of armor. And so every week we've been talking about what the right kind of armor looks like for these specific strongholds that we've been working on. And when we get to the last part of this series, we'll get even more specific about preventing strongholds in your life and healing from strongholds in your life. And so tonight we're going to continue with another specific stronghold. And what I want to talk about tonight is the stronghold of anger and defensiveness. And so I think for a lot of people that, especially if you're a Christian, one of your deals is going to be you kind of have maybe been led to believe somewhere along the way that anger just absolutely is just a wrong thing, that anger is a bad thing, that it's a bad emotion, and that even moreover, that Christians, well, they really shouldn't have that emotion. So I want to get into that for starters, and then we'll move forward. So my question to get started with that issue is this: does God show and have the emotion of anger? Well, I guess the other question would be does God show and have the emotion of defensiveness? No. Does God ever display any level of defensiveness? No. However, does God display the emotion of anger? He does. If you look at the first half of the Bible, every time that something is happening to what is called the nation of Israel, the people that are God followers, they start to ask God, why are you being so unfair to us? Why are you allowing this stuff to happen to us? How come this next country is taking us into captivity, et cetera, depending on whatever all is going on with them? Why are we in captivity? And God basically tells them some of the same things every time. And this is what he tells them: you're not looking out for the other guy. You're not paying attention to justice. You're not paying attention to compassion. You're not caring for and loving other people. You're consumed and obsessed with you, and you're consumed and obsessed with your well-being, and you're consumed and obsessed with how well you're going to do and what advantage you're going to be able to take. So lots of anger on God's part about injustice. Plenty of anger on God's part for our sake, but plenty of anger on God's part coming toward idolatry, when we have idols in our lives. You can read different stories from different directions, might not be called idols, but about idols. An idol is anything that I decide is God in my life, or an idol is anything that I decide I'm going to put ahead of God in my life. And in our case, in the case of compulsion, codependency, and a variety of other challenges and strongholds, we tend to get there by putting ourselves as our own God ahead of God. Another place where you can see some of that emotion of God comes in a story about Jesus, And you have Jesus walking into a temple, and Jesus sees that this temple is being defaced, and it has become it's become a marketplace. It's just become a Walmart sort of. And man, Jesus takes him on, and he cleans out that temple right away. And he doesn't mince words, and he doesn't make it easy for the people that are there. And you see his anger and his passion and that emotion of anger coming out in him. And man, it's right there. And we got to pay attention to the fact that these kinds of examples are there, because what it's telling us is God isn't trying to say, well, part of your brokenness is that you in fact have the anger of emotion. It's not that. It's like, what are we doing? What are we doing with the emotion of anger? What are we doing with that? Another example would be Jesus and Peter. So one day Jesus and Peter are talking, and Peter basically goes to Jesus, you know what? Like, you can be famous. I mean, and you could make us famous, and you could be a really good king. You could be a really important king. He's basically going to tell him, you could be very wealthy. You could run the world. And we, as your buds, we can run it with you. And Jesus and Peter is responding to something Jesus said earlier to him, which is that it was gonna be necessary, he said, for him to suffer and die. Well, Peter doesn't like that, because that takes Peter out of the line of being a famous guy with him. And maybe Peter's thinking wealthy and all of that. So he tells Jesus he doesn't think that's necessary. He thinks there's another way for Jesus to do what he came to do. And when Jesus hears that, he tells Peter, you got to get behind me, Satan. That's an angry statement. And it's meant to dislodge actually a stronghold that is going on in Peter, which has to do with him thinking he really can be famous. I mean, so anger, every one of those examples involving God and the examples involving Jesus, what it shows you, I think, real clearly is that anger does create energy. Sometimes it can be an energy that is, in fact, positive, because it can move us to positive change. It can move us to positive action. It can move us to understand something in our life maybe that isn't resolved, that we haven't resolved, something that we really got to work on, something that we really got to pay attention to. So all that would be a positive outcome of the energy that anger can create, but there's also a lot of other stuff about anger that can cause us a ton of problems. What is the base emotion behind anger? Well, one of the things that almost everybody believes to be true is that anger is really is a secondary emotion. It's a surface emotion that is speaking to a deeper level of activity inside of us. And so it's true that the deeper level of emotion for a lot of us when it comes to being angry is that we've been hurt. And instead of being able to talk about the way we've been hurt, because we don't like that, because that's more difficult to do, we go off and we decide we're going to display our hurt and protect ourselves, be defensive by being angry. We're not going to go, man, that really hurt me. We're going to pop off on somebody, and we're going to defend ourselves by using that emotion of anger. Pain is also another driver of anger, and so I don't address the pain in my life. I don't address when somebody hurts me. It begins to fester. And now what everybody else sees in me is my anger, because they're not digging long enough to get into what's hurting me or what caused me pain. They're just trying to basically get out of the way of my anger. So that puts them on the run. And sometimes it'll put the very person that I need to resolve my hurt with or resolve my pain with, it'll put that person on the run. It'll cause them to avoid me, and it'll make the level of hurt and the level of pain that much deeper. I think another piece of anger is that's a driver is that I feel like something in my life or something in life or something in the world is generally wrong or incomplete. Generally wrong or incomplete. Another way of putting that is somehow I've decided that the way the world is working for me, or the way this relationship is working for me, or the way this job or whatever is working for me is unfair, that I'm getting, it's unjust, that I'm getting ripped off, that I'm not being treated fairly, that it's not legit. And so my reaction to that, which is really a hurt, my reaction to that is to fight. And generally the fight to the other person is like, they think out of the blue because they can't figure out what's wrong. And they can't figure out what's wrong because you can't tell them. And you can't tell them because now the main thing that appears to be wrong is you're angry. But dealing with that anger right there isn't going to satisfy the deeper pain or the deeper hurt that has been driving the bus to get you there. So that's kind of the basis of the way the emotion of anger works. But I want to talk now I want to get into what moves anger in general to a stronghold. What makes anger go from being an emotion that, maybe I struggle with to something that is a legitimate stronghold? Well, here are some of the features that'll take us there. I think number one, I have an illusion that I am more in control of stuff in my life than in fact I am. So I have an illusion of control that is out of balance. I believe that I ought to be able to manage this, or I ought to be able to manage that. I ought to be able to call this shot or that shot. I ought to be able to create that decision or that decision, and other people, places, or things, whatever, get in the way. And now I'm angry because the control that I thought I had, I don't have. And so for a while, what I'm probably going to do with that piece of this stronghold is I'm going to fight harder. Like I'm going to argue more with you. I'm going to get into it more. I'm going to express more of my anger and see if maybe I can get you to back off so that I can be back in control, which is what I believe I want and need. Number two, I have decided over a period of time that maybe the only way I get things done with people that are in my life is I have to get really angry. And maybe I even said that out loud. Well, tried to tell you, but you didn't listen to me. And so now I'm really, really angry because the only way you respond to me, apparently, is when I'm really mad. That's the only way I can get things done. That's the only way I can get things to change. And then the part that I'm not saying is that I have learned that is the way that I can get what I want. And so the third part of this would be an addiction to me getting what I want, and me believing that disappointment or not getting what I want or finding myself, quote, on the short end of the stick about something, or not having things work out the way I think they should work out. A lot of that has to do with expectations, which we'll talk more about, but not getting what I want, having an addiction to not getting what I want is going to feed this stronghold of anger. And then fourth, I know that I'm in the middle of a stronghold with anger when it's doing significant, pervasive, and consistent damage to my relationships. Consistent, negative damage to my relationships. Fifth, I know that this is a stronghold in my life when it is now doing damage to my emotional security system. That means like at some point, the only way I really feel like I'm in control and the only way I feel really safe and the only way I feel really okay and the only way I feel like I can really defend myself is for me to be really angry. And it not only does damage to somebody else's emotional security system, because now they feel very out of sorts with me. They're not sure if they really want to be around me. They're not really sure if they know how to be around me. They're not really sure what's going to come next when they are around me. So now I have threatened their emotional security system relative to me. And then B, I've threatened my own emotional security system because now I've got to stay at that emotional, driving, angry high in order to feel like I'm okay, in order to feel like other people are not going to take advantage of me. It kind of goes back to the point earlier that I only feel like I can really get things done with other people in relationships when I'm angry. So the 12 and 12 says it this way. I think it's really good. 12 and 12 says, the chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. That's what we've been talking about. Primarily the fear that we would lose something we already possess or would fail to get something that we demanded. Living upon a basis of unsatisfied demands, we were and are in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Continual disturbance and frustration because I'm afraid I'm going to lose something I have, or I'm not going to get something that I want, or maybe more importantly, based on expectations that I believe I deserve. So that's from the 12 and 12. Really ought to get that book if you don't have one. Step 7. Sort of like goes to some of the outcomes of what that piece of writing talks about, are like the deal that, well, you know what, you have the right to expect that. You have the right to have that. That is what is feeding this stronghold. So it feeds the stronghold when you let the enemy basically say to you, you know what, you have the right. You deserve that. You deserve for this to happen. You deserve to have this happen. You deserve this new job. You deserve this much money. You deserve that inheritance. You deserve 8 million other things. You deserve it. Families fight like wild people about money because like it's just such a driver. It's just like money is an absolute idol and an absolute God for people because we want to believe that that is what's going to make us ultimately secure. So you have the right thinking definitely takes you to feeding this stronghold. Turning anger inward feeds this stronghold. I'm seething, I'm really angry, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell anybody else that. I might act out on it once in a while, and I might lose my mind in the middle of something that seems to be completely innocent, and nobody really knows why that happened. Someone may ask you, like, where'd that come from? And you're going to go, never mind, I don't know, I'm just having a bad day, which really isn't the half of it. There's so much more to what's happening, but you don't want to talk about it because you've turned that anger inward and decided it's better for you to eat it. Except the problem with this stronghold is it's like any other stronghold is, it's eating you. We eat what we feel, a lot of us. So we're having a bad day, we're angry, and what we're going to do is we're going to try to satisfy that anger by saying, I deserve to go eat this, or I deserve not to eat, because somehow that'll make me feel not eating will make me feel more in control. Eating a lot, eating what I want, sort of emotionally gifting myself with something I want to eat, and not gifting myself sort of are on the same spectrum, because I believe that in both of those cases, I believe that that's going to give me a renewed sense of control. We might drink or use to deal with what we feel. That's obviously, we know a lot about that, but that's not the only way. There are a lot of other ways that we can turn anger inward. Sex can do it, a lot of other things. that we can be involved in that are going to take control of us. They can do that. And that turning anger inward is an absolute feeder system for enhancing this stronghold of anger. In the South, we like to do this thing that we call smile and be nice. I'm really seething inside, but I'm smiling at you, making sure that you believe while I'm deceiving the heck out of you that everything's just fine. Smile and be nice. Maybe I'm going to believe that I just am not going to attend to the pain at all. Sometimes that's true when I have a self-destructive value set in me that says, I don't really deserve to have those emotions. I don't really deserve to be angry. No one ever gave me a sense of worth to where I'm really allowed to feel that. So it's just natural, unfortunately, that other people are going to step on me. But see, it isn't going to make that emotion go away. What's going to happen is 5 years later, I'm going to have a stroke, or I'm going to have a heart attack, or I'm going to be distracted, or something's going to happen to me, have a wreck, whatever. But anger just doesn't go away because I believe somehow I don't deserve for there to be an honest expression or an honest outcome. Somebody described anger as, and I love this phrase, mental drunkenness. Mental drunkenness. It's a disorienting emotion because it doesn't allow me, in most cases, to get down to the core of the matter. It keeps me distracted with the external expression that I'm looking at, and that's what I and everybody else is focusing on, and then I and everybody else, we got to figure out how to attend to that external outcome. But it's drunkenness because I'm disoriented from actually feeling what's going on inside of me. It leads to what we talk about all the time here, and so powerful of an emotion, and that is resentments. Hazelton, large recovery group based in Minnesota, they talk about resentments as cold, hard anger. Anger that has sat there and sat there and sat there and sat there, and now it expresses itself in all kinds of surprising ways. Primarily resentments that I hold toward other people that are conceived before I ever listen to what they have to say or find myself in any kind of a conversation with them. They've already got 2.5 or 3 or 5, whatever, strikes against them. That's what resentments do. Well, how do we get some freedom from this stronghold of anger? How do we get some freedom from this stronghold of anger? And again, we're going to do more work with dealing with strongholds and healing from strongholds and being free from them as we move in and on in this series. But first thing to do to experience some freedom from the stronghold of anger is to really ask myself, what's my part? What's my part in this? Do I have a part in what I'm angry about? It's kind of like an example of, I have this coffee cup, right? And I keep cleaning the outside of this cup. But I never do clean the inside of the cup. And eventually, when I keep drinking out of that cup, it's got the possibility and the likelihood even, I guess, of making me sick because there's all kind of junk that has grown inside of that cup. And just pouring more coffee into that cup isn't going to make it go away. It might make it not visible, but it's not going to make it go away. So I got to ask, what's my part? I got to ask myself, what is the deeper hurt here? And what is the deeper pain here? And that goes to, where am I really with this? It's not so much what's my role, but it's asking the question, what is actually happening, not outside of me, but what is actually happening inside of me? Number 2, do I lack confidence in what God will do? Do I believe that God is fully in charge of my life? Do I believe that God fully loves me? Do I believe that God would never do anything to hurt me or damage me? And do I believe that God has my best interests at heart? Or do I lack confidence in all of that and believe that, when it comes down to what's important, I got to fight for myself? Number 3, I got to ask myself, do I have a false understanding of fairness? Somehow do I believe that the world or relationships or people or work or circumstances will, because I'm me and because somehow I'm entitled, all those things really ought to be fair. And life just really ought to be fair. And people ought to be fair. And stuff ought to be fair, because if I actually believe that, man, I'm going to have a whale of time living in this world. Jesus goes, in this world, you're going to have trouble. He never says anything about fairness. He never says, and if you become a Christian, everybody's going to be fair and everything around you is going to be fair, and you're not going to have any negative circumstances and your life's going to be wonderful. No, in this world, living right now, you are going to have trouble. Expect trouble. Expect things to be unfair. And as long as I have a false understanding of fairness or entitlement, another way of putting it, I'm going to keep feeding this stronghold of anger. Number 4, take a breath. Take a breath. Just take a breath and sit down and begin to allow the way you're feeling to soak in, and run through all the scenarios you have to until you can get down to the one that takes you down to the level below that says, what is actually hurting me? Why am I actually in pain? What is actually making me feel empty? You got to ask yourself, who are you really fighting? Are you fighting yourself? Often that's true. Are you fighting that sense of fairness? Often that's true. Are you fighting God? Often that's true. Or have you disguised all of that by thinking you're fighting somebody else? It goes along with the question of, have you ever asked yourself where your expectations, maybe even of fairness, come from? Where do they come from? Who established them? Who brought those into your life? How did you bring those into your life? Have you ever stopped and asked yourself that question? A guy, Mark Merrill, has 3 good things as far as dealing with the stronghold of anger, I think. Number 1, he goes, you got to face it. You got to face the fact that you're mad. Then you got to go to work on the question, why am I so mad? What is going on underneath the surface that is causing me this pain? How have I been hurt? You got to face that truth. Secondly, you got to find it. You got to find within yourself that depth of what is really happening. And then third, you got to figure it out. Now that I know what I'm feeling, and now that I'm facing it down, what am I going to do about it? What am I going to do about it? Am I going to attempt to resolve this? Am I going to go to the person that hurt me and begin to share honestly the truth of that with them? Knowing that they may respond the way I would like them to and they may not, but knowing that it's worth it for me to share that truth? Or am I going to start to work on myself, or maybe work on my own expectations? There's a thing that we teach in anger management called cognitive restructuring. And what that has to do is, I can just be in an absolute full-on fit about something that is happening in front of me. One of my personal faves is, you go into a store and you want to buy something, and basically there's apparently nobody in the front of the store that'll take your money. You can go to the self-help little demonic machines, that's what I think they are. You can go to little self-checkout machines. You can do that. But there isn't anybody else up there to really take your money. Well, I can go on and on about that and stand around and do this, or I can go to myself, well, the fact of the matter is, what do I really want to do? I want to buy this item. I want to leave this store. I want to take this item home, and I want to get on with it. Well, then the choice maybe of the self-checkout thing isn't as bad, because now I've begun to restructure the way I am seeing what is in front of me. You might say, man, if I completely lose it with this person, what is the outcome of that going to be? And is the outcome of that, the way that's going to be, is that really the way I want this story to end? Cognitive restructuring says I take the immediate emotion of anger and I begin to restructure the available outcomes for me that are more creative, more advantageous to health, and more advantageous to a positive outcome. Next, I think a big way through dealing with the stronghold of anger is take a walk with God. Let God be the person in your life for an afternoon or an hour while you're walking who says, tell me all about it. Why don't you tell me all about it? You talk, I'll listen. I won't even intervene. You talk, I'll listen, and then we'll talk. Take a walk with God. Take a spiritual walk with God long enough to get it all out. And then last, what would it be like? How would your level of anger change? What would the release from the stronghold of anger be like if and when you actually decided to let God do his job? What would that be like? What would it be like if you let God be God? Well, think of the things that we've been talking about today that would drop off. The stronghold pieces of this that would drop off. The idolatry piece, I got to be in charge, only I can do it. Think of all those key pieces that we've been talking about that wouldn't be there if I just became willing to allow God to do his job. Step 2 says it right, that came to believe that only a power greater than me, not my thinking, not my energy, not my anger, not my demanding, not my control, came to believe that a power greater than me could and would restore me to sanity. So I want to read to you to close to finish tonight from the book of James. And it kind of takes you to a place of perspective about this stronghold of anger. Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Doesn't say never get angry. It says slow to get angry. Human anger, and that's the key, human anger doesn't produce the righteousness that God desires. It doesn't produce the righteousness. It doesn't produce the freedom. It doesn't produce the love in and of itself that God is looking for. God's looking for a greater freedom in your life tonight. God's looking for a greater freedom in your heart. He's looking to free you from the stronghold of anger. If that's your stronghold, there are a lot of ways for us to be able to help you. Just reach out. Let us know, and we'd be glad to set you in the right direction. Thanks for being a part of this in Jesus' sweet name. Amen.